Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome to the Dreaming Prophet. Tonight we have a very special topic, that great unknown, the instrument whose winsome sound fills up our whole town and lifts up our spirits. And tonight, even better, we have our very own conductor to lead us through this magnificent journey into our vast song. So, dear listeners, I have a question for you tonight. What's the difference between a conductor and a god? The answer, of course, is that Speak as One doesn't think they're a conductor. My name's Lavanya.
And I'm Astro.
And welcome to the Dreaming Prophet.
This is a Blackout Club show for Blackout Club players with minimal speculation, all lore, and a focus on the known facts. Our topic of the day is the instrument.
And as for our spoiler warning for today, you can consider yourself the rich kid at Christmas, Hanukkah, Diwali, or whatever seasonally appropriate holiday you want to cram on in there, because tonight you are going to be spoiled. Our discussion tonight covers the map, various details of it. It covers partially the history of Speak as One. It covers what the song is in itself and how it is created and translated throughout the thing. We will be discussing the game engine in part. We will be discussing the sound effects. We'll be discussing some of the people who have worked on the sound effects behind the scenes. Insofar as they are credited, we are basically just dipping our fingers in every single pot. So if you're allergic to spoilers, just tap on out on this episode. In terms of content warning, there is surprisingly little. As long as you don't hate sounds, music, joy, or human nature, you should be fine.
So, Lavanya, you know I've been wanting to cover this for a while, but I can't do it without help. Firstly, I'd like to extend a special thank you to Olive and to Coolguy, who have helped me process the vast amount of information and research we've done for this episode.
And when Astro says Coolguy, what they mean is cool guy, because that's his name. If you open up the dictionary and you look next to the definition of cool, guy, you will see his picture there. We have personally gone through every dictionary in the United States and stapled a picture there just to ensure this is true.
Man, you guys have a lot more free time than I thought.
Who let you in?
And as you've discovered, Lavanya, we have a guest today also. Welcome back to the show, Xaviul.
They let me in once and I haven't left since, so now they have to deal with me. I will leave to get more tranks, though.
So we're going to start off with the song. This was primarily discussed in episode 7, which hopefully you all listened to, internalized, and adored. But just in case you didn't, because you're godless heathens, I will go ahead and explain what it is for you. The song is both a hive mind and an audible sound. When I say hive mind, what I mean is that it contains all of the memories and individuals from the past that made up components of Speak as One. The song was once easily heard and understood by humans, but now not so much. This is probably because of the word, which we discussed in a great deal more detail in episode 7 and episode 5. So you should go back and listen to those. While the voice interprets the song, not everyone has this ability. This is a special aptitude that is found in certain individuals that can allow them to be the voice. For everyone else who doesn't have that special song in their ear, the song needs to be amplified. Which led to the question, well, fuck, what do you do when you have a mystical, magical brainwashing sound that half the population can't hear? Which, of course, leads us to build a giant fucking instrument.
The instrument is a giant tunnel network under the town equipped with massive scale parts of one huge instrument. It can be played by many people at once and requires constant maintenance. It's constantly being expanded. We see this in rooms like New Growth and 920 Observation. Dax also calls it the maze, which is information from bells in the prologue, and it's kind of both. No part of the instrument is an exact one-to-one with in-real-life instruments, however, many parts contain elements of instruments that we know.
The idea says that the instrument is old, very old. However, we don't have an exact date or age, much like we don't have an exact date for anything in Redacre. He specifies that the tech inside it is fairly new. You can see this in the screens and in the labs and a lot of the fiddly-diddly details. And as you can see as you're roaming around the maze, a lot of the tech inside it looks pretty fucking old, straight from the 1950s or the 1980s, whatever difference there may be between those two eras. in those giant LCD screens and everything else. Which leads to the interesting question. Does the instrument predate Redacre? Or is Redacre just really fucking old?
Kind of the chicken and the egg there.
Smash the egg to embrace the freedom of revolution.
I thought that was the opposite of what your whole spiel was.
I'm flexible.
Some parts of the maze contribute directly to the song, and some don't. It would probably be more accurate to refer to all the music-making parts as the instrument and everything else as the maze. However, we are going to use them interchangeably here, especially since even the non-music-making rooms often have music-making parts in them.
The instrument is played by a mass of people. No one individual can play it, it's just too darn big, so everyone must work together. There are several parts of the instrument which have control panels in them which explicitly connect to the sound-making parts. In Plexus, there are panels surrounding the giant airbags at the base and under the walkway at the far side, and string relay, signal relay, and host conditioning all have 2 terminals in them. Old Growth Basement has 1 terminal.
There are many other parts of the instrument that contain controls such as this, but we're not getting into all of those right now. It would be honestly too many to count. Information encoded into the song is shared with all parts of the song. This is why sometimes a choice is made to stop encoding. We can see this in the Maddie Shaw logs in the journals. Encoding is an intentional action, not passive. Information won't be encoded purely by accident. Information you might not want encoded might be encoded if you're sleep-talking, but that's because consent is a lie and choice is a poison, according to SAO.
However, encoding information is treated as the default choice. Refusing to encode information scares the watchers, and it is treated as taboo. The song is supposed to be the truth. If you're excluding things, that's lying by omission.
And the watchers sometimes take it upon themselves to make this kind of judgment. They will at times choose to withhold information from the song themselves. Encoding is done by chordists. When you are referring to a chordist who is encoding at that time, they are considered the chordist performant. So let's say that you're a kid in the Blackout Club. Crazy, I know. You're on a mission and you commit a sin. So what sin do you guys commit?
Xaviul, you go first.
Xaviul is an expert on the types of sins that can be committed.
Wow, this is a lot of perjury, and I won't hear any of it.
Okay, I do need a legit sin to continue with this.
Assault.
Assault.
I put the ass in assault.
Thank you, complimentary laugh last follower. You attack an enemy. Let's say you attack a Lucid. In-game, here's what happens. Lucids report sins to their dispatcher.
How? Murderers. These children are murderers.
We aren't sure exactly how this is done, but it's likely done using phones. Lucids have their phones with them. You can see them using it as a flashlight, and you can also see them typing on their phones when they pause in their tracks.
Makes you wonder, who's the real parasite, SAO or technology?
This isn't a game about friendship. This is a game about the dangers of social media. So turn off that computer and turn off that phone, kids.
Wait, don't they need the computer to listen to us?
Stop asking questions.
You know too much. Lucids report sins to the dispatcher through their phones. Sleepers can also report sins, but we're not sure if they use the same mechanism or a different one.
He does not hear our hearts.
Sleepers do have their phones on them at all times, because when you prank call them, they respond. They ask, is this the voice? Or, yes, music? This is conjecture, but phones often ambiently record voices and things happening around us. We've seen this recently in our own real smartphones, and it's entirely possible that chorus phones do the same thing, which may be why Lucids say, speak out loud for the voice. The dispatcher dispatches.
More assault. Need a witness.
The dispatcher will send out information to the other agents in the field, which include the Lucids and also the stalker. When you are playing in stalker mode, you can hear the dispatcher's voice in your ear telling you about the things that the kids are doing. Chordist Lucids, or what I like to call DJ Lucids, receive information from the dispatcher and play strings at the terminal. This is a very rare interaction, but if you are very lucky and you happen to be in the right place at the right time, a Lucid will go over to a terminal in any of the rooms that have terminals and will play the organ keys there. It creates a very specific pattern of notes that is then sent off into the ether to become part of the song. The song tracks the player's sins over the night. By the time that information reaches the Cordist Lucids and becomes part of the song, everyone in the song knows about the assault that you committed. They know that you've attacked a Lucid, they know where, and they know that you're still out there. And when that amount of sin passes a certain threshold, say that you tackle a few more people, you do some prank calling, you kick in a few doors, the Shape will come out to hunt you, and he will use the song to prioritize who he needs to hunt. While hunting, players who are seen by anyone in the song, Sleeper, Lucid, Stalker, Shaped Kids, will have their exact location reported to the Shape.
This leads us into our next section, design of the instrument, and design of the video game itself. Now, in the spoiler content warning, I said that we'd be speaking of the gameplay systems. This is one instance. We're going to be discussing the audio system that underlies the Blackout Club and various aspects of it, which means that we're going to be stepping away from the lore for a moment, and we're just going to be digging straight into the nitty-gritty, as far as we can tell, because unfortunately we don't have access to engine code.
Let's talk about the audio design of the game. It's really good. Good audio design immerses you so much that you don't notice it. If you notice it, something has gone wrong. This is why audio designers rarely get noticed for their work unless they are extremely exceptional in very obvious ways, like making a specific sound or an iconic piece of music, or really bad. And this is true across all disciplines. It's not restricted just to game design. You can find this in the theater arts, you can find this in the music industry, pretty much everywhere.
And when Astra says that the sound design in this game is really good, they are not fucking with you. The sound design in this game is fucking amazing. Most of the game can be played with eyes closed. And as someone who personally, first thing that I do every single time I load up a game is I disable all sounds. If you actually do that in the Blackout Club, you are basically cutting your own hamstrings. You will be playing at half speed the entire time because it's not only really great to listen to, but it's actually pretty vital to overall gameplay.
The sound design of the Blackout Club gives you critical information, as Lavanya has mentioned. Surround sound, when you're using headphones, means that you can hear exactly where enemies are on a two-dimensional plane. In real life, our ears hear only on a two-dimensional plane. Each ear receives information independently. If information reaches the left ear before the right ear, our brain registers that that sound is on the left. And all of this happens in an instant.
Each enemy makes specific sounds on all types of terrain. Recently, this has gotten a amplified effect in the game to, we'll call it mixed reviews. But Sleepers have heavier footfalls than the Lucids do. The Sleeper Elites have boots, while the regular Sweepwalkers have bare feet. Makes you wonder why they don't wake up wondering why their feet are covered in cuts and mud, and Sleepers and Lucids also have different voices and voice lines that they will say through the night. Camera drones buzz constantly as they move, though mounted cameras are silent.
You also subconsciously receive information about things further away from you. The way your own footsteps and other sound reflect off the environment and back to you tells you more about where you are. Even player voices are affected by sound reflection. If one player is inside a cave, say an exit cave, or even some parts of the instrument, all of the players' voices will echo and resonate as if they were inside that cave. All entry or exit caves, except the one behind 922 Howdley, will do this. You can contrast this sound with times that you enter soundproof rooms, such as subliminal media. Inside subliminal media, all sound is more muted. There's no echo at all, to the point that it's kind of unnerving. This information can tell you roughly how big the room is, how close you are to the wall, and what the texture of the wall is. It's less reliable if you're playing blind due to many different factors, but it still gives you more information, which builds your mental profile of your surroundings. And this leads us to one critical fact. In most cases, you can tell where you are in the map solely by sound. So, we are going to play a little game. I I have prepared sound clips of different areas of the map, and I would like you two, my lovely co-hosts, to tell me where you think they were taken.
A competition? I can't wait to grind lavanya into the dirt.
There's nothing I love more than listening to loud versions of the sounds that usually I keep at 5%. I believe in myself utterly.
All right, I've sent you an easy clip to start us off. Go ahead and listen to this and tell me where you think it was taken.
Now, some of us may think something as foolish as, this could be the plexus, but I want all of you to know. I recognize this sound personally from my...
It's the airway.
God damn it, Xaviul, don't snipe me in the middle of my monologue.
All right, let's listen to another one.
Oh, this is the plexus.
You are absolutely correct.
Can't miss those airbags.
And one more for good measure.
Is this strings?
Close.
Is this somnically?
No.
Not close. Oh, this is nerve.
Exactly.
3 for 3!
This is why Xaviel's the one at the top of the leadership boards with 1,000+ hours, or is it 2,000 now?
I'm almost at 1,200.
Ooh.
The theme song of the Blackout Club was made by an artist named Nathan Moody. We'll attach a link to his Bandcamp in the description so that you can hear all of the incredible music he makes. He makes all of his songs with handmade instruments. The theme song isn't something you can replicate, not perfectly, with any conventional instruments we know. Meanwhile, the general sound design of the Blackout Club was made by an artist named Patrick Balthrop. He also has a website that you can find in our description. His studio is called Interactive Sound and Fury. His position as sound designer means that he is responsible for what we hear in-game, the sounds that aren't the theme and the voice lines. But he does control how we hear those sounds too. He worked on BioShock, among many other things. Bloody Disgusting had an opportunity to interview Null. They asked a question about sound design, and Null got an answer from Mr. Balthrop. We are going to break down that answer here.
Early on in making the Blackout Club, Jordan pitched me the giant instrument and I got to work. I began to think of architecture that would emit sound by existing in the world. I immediately began to think of Harry Bertoa's sound sculptures and sent a reference to the team. Bertoa's work was an influence on how I began to approach the sound design of the instrument.
So in the middle of that section, there's a link to a video of Harry Bertoa's work. If you haven't watched the video, what you see is a large room filled with a lot of things that make sounds, and we'll call them instruments, but they don't look like conventional instruments. In the maze, we encounter these things called danger sticks, for lack of a better name. They are essentially steel rods that have been stuck into the ground that, when you walk through, by, or near them, produce a fuck ton of noise. However, even if you never interact with them, those rods are still making noise. Wind that passes through the maze will agitate them just a little bit and create a gentle musical sound. Harry Bertoa's room existing makes music, and humans can act on it to make different sounds, but simply by existing, it makes sound.
Once I established the palette, I set about solving how these sounds would work together musically in the game.
So this is like a color palette, but for sound instead of visual art. What kind of qualities, what kind of sounds does he want in this design?
All the sounds of the giant instrument are emitting musical notes in a pentatonic scale procedurally. I designed them this way so that I could have them overlap one another, procedurally creating harmonies with each part of the instrument, contributing to a larger piece of music.
So I mentioned sound quality. Sound quality is any attribute of music or sound, and you can use this in different contexts. I can say a sound quality is clear sound quality, or I can say organic sound quality. Different materials make different sounds. This has to do with the makeup of the material on a molecular level. What is it made of? How dense is it? How light? How smooth? And how rough?
So on a fun tangent, yesterday we were in the airways sipping our mountain coffee shop lattes, available now at 5 p.m. from Lambert Drugstore. Remember, shop local.
Do we get a choice?
No, you don't have a choice. Choice is a lie, and one day you will get used to that. Anyway, when I told Astro, hey, listen to those trumpets go, And then Astro knocked me to the ground, sat on me, and forced me to listen to them reading the definitions of woodwinds over and over and over again. So this means now I'm properly prepared to explain what that means to you, my favorite listeners. So the sound that you get from metal is significantly different from wood, stone, etc., etc. So you can hear the difference when you're listening to them. And the way that the materials interact also creates different sound qualities.
So because I'm a percussionist by trade, I'm going to use my favorite instrument section to introduce this topic. I'm going to have you guys listen to an instrument called a vibraphone.
Sounds metally.
Alright, now contrast this with this sound clip of a marimba.
It got awful Toy Story in here because this sounds woody.
Oh, fuck.
So, as Xaviul's alluded to, these instruments are made of different materials. The vibraphone is made of metal, where the marimba has almost the exact same setup, but its keys are made of wood. Critically, the marimba is not made entirely of wood. It also has metal tubes under it. But what you're hearing is a difference in the material of the keys. Even if you aren't familiar enough with these instruments to recognize them as soon as you hear them, you can tell that there's a difference when you listen to them side by side. And so this concept has been used to create new instruments out of things that already exist. For instance, Adolf Sax created the saxophone, and his goal was to combine the power of the brass section, such as trumpets and tubas and trombones, with the versatility of the woodwinds, who can play very gentle and very quick cadences. So there's another word that we need to define, which is pentatonic. Literally, this means of 5 tones. This means 5 notes per octave. Now, octave as a word is kind of misleading because it means 8, oct, of course, but there are actually only 7 true notes in an octave, because the 8th note is the same as the first note, but 1 octave higher. Similarly, pentatonic has 5 notes, and then the 6th note is the same as the first, but 1 octave higher. Pentatonic scales were developed independently in music around the world.
I'm sorry, I tuned out for a second. Are we talking about Pentatonics? Because I love that band.
So pentatonic scales were developed in Celtic music, in German music, Nordic music, Turkish music, Afro-Caribbean music, and many others beyond that. Bottom line is, a lot of music uses these scales, and you have definitely heard pentatonic scales before because they sound good. For instance, the song Amazing Grace uses pentatonic scales. You've also heard them because you play the Blackout Club. The point of the decision to use pentatonic scales was to make a pool of sounds, a palette, so to speak, where you could pull any 2 notes out and they would sound good together, and this was a really smart decision. The last thing we want to convey here is that this was lazy. It isn't lazy, so don't use this new knowledge to insult the game's team.
When the player is underground in the Blackout Club, they are playing through a procedural musical piece that is evolving harmonically and texturally. Now that we're wrapping up that quote, what that means is that the game is writing its own music as we play. The music generated by the game in the background is related to the action of the player. So, like I told Astro the first time they explained this all to me, it's like you're getting your own personal composition every single time you play. So that's pretty fucking nifty. We have one more supplemental quote from Null, which is about the design of the maze. So, we wanted it to feel timeless, like the vision of a mind that is far from human. The hope is that it feels like it transcends technology from a particular time, but relies more on the blood and the sweat of the humans who occupy it. So keep in mind, what this means is that canonly, the humans of Red Acre are the powerhouse of the instrument.
Isn't this episode nerdy enough without making nerd jokes?
These 2 quotes have profound significance when you consider the instrument and the song that it creates. Instrument technology has not changed much in many years, as far back as we can find through history and archaeology. Our drums are still material of whatever kind stretched over a hollow frame. Our stringed instruments still use tension and string length to create different sounds, and for literally thousands of years we have made music in much the same ways, even though we've called those instruments different things and made different kinds of music with them. And now, we need to talk about the language of bodies, after a word from our sponsors.
Chorus Family Friendly Supportive Services wants your help to create harmonious home environments in the chorus communities. We're looking for employees excited to provide only the most thorough, attentive care for lovable children. Life in childcare just ain't what it used to be, and sometimes we all just need to work as one to support our community. So apply to Chorus today to become a certified, vetted childcare professional and help create a better future for all of us.
So now that we're back from that stunning commercial break, the structure is what we are going to be covering next. Because the thing to keep in mind is that the instrument is not just an instrument. The instrument is not just a tool for playing the song and allowing people to hear it. The instrument is a location. All of the rooms of the maze were hand-built and planned by the developers. So huge shout out to the team. All of the little details, everything that you see, these are not generic cave designs or maze or anything else. Everything in these rooms has a purpose and is there for a specific reason.
They're meant to look and feel realistic, just a few degrees of separation from our reality, like something you could really stumble into and lose all sense of individuality in. TBC is low fantasy. Realistic is in air quotes, but deal with it.
Low fantasy? I don't know about that. Because can we say that Eldritch gods really don't exist in our world? Probably. But have you seen a squid lately? Have you seen them dance even after they have embraced death?
I live in Virginia. I haven't seen the ocean in years. But part of the horror element is making you question that part of your known reality. The Blackout Club straddles the line between real and imaginary and blurs it wherever they can, or wherever it's more interesting.
So, because of this, there are real design principles that came into play when sculpting the maze. So, let's start with something we know. One of the things we've been told about the song in fiction is that it doesn't just need to be heard to have an impact. In an older The I Dare talk, a player suggested, why not use headphones to stop the song? And The I Dare said, unfortunately, it resonates in the whole body. So let's talk about resonance. This is vibration, the continuation of sound. Resonance sounds similar to echoing, but there's one key difference. Echoing bounces. Resonance vibrates.
Resonance is especially interesting because eardrums are not the only way that we can hear. We can also hear through our bones, which sounds incredibly fake, but trust me, it turns out your bones can do a lot. To be super technical, even the way that we hear through our eardrums is really very tiny bones. They vibrate, the sound vibrates through the rest of us, and then we hear it.
No, that's not how that works.
265 bones in the human body, and Lavanya's still tone deaf.
Hey!
Our ears have 3 very small bones in them that interconnect to each other. And when the eardrum vibrates, it vibrates those bones. So technically, all hearing happens through our bones. You can notice bone resonance in your own life, when you're at the dentist's office, or grinding your teeth, or clicking them together.
Oh, that's horrible for your teeth.
Tuning forks also work this way. They're not great at vibrating air, but they can vibrate other materials, like your jawbone. The sound that you hear from that is that sound traveling through your jaw to a place where your brain can receive it. Sound travels best through solids because the atoms are closer together. All materials have what's called resonant frequencies. This is the frequency of sound that makes it wiggle or oscillate if it's not being affected by any other external force. And this is why glass breaks if you sing at it, which is a real thing that happens, which you may be inclined to chalk it up to cartoon logic, but it is something that you can feasibly do.
They did a Mythbusters episode on it.
Glass isn't flexible, so instead of bending or wiggling, it just breaks. But other materials can bend, like metal and wood, and parts of the human body. I have a couple fun links in this section, which I'll attach in the description, but there's an article on PopSci, which is an excerpt from a book called Acoustic Weapons. Here's a quote from it. Vic Tandy wrote a paper for the Journal of the Society for Physical Research, not my usual fare, called Ghosts in the Machine, in which they describe how they got to the root of stories of a haunted laboratory. People in the lab had described seeing ghostly gray shapes that disappeared when they turned to face them. Upon examining the area, it turned out that a fan was resonating the room at 18.98 hertz, almost exactly the resonant frequency of the human eyeball. When the fan was turned off, so did all the stories of ghostly apparitions. So humans can hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz on average. Age can be a factor in this, and so can many other things. For a frame of reference, the sound of my voice averages at about 178 to 180 hertz. At lowest, I can hit about 170 hertz.
Brag about it.
Frequency isn't the only factor. Volume is also key. Volume is measured in decibels, or dB. According to HealthLink BC, normal conversation is about 60 decibels, a lawnmower is about 90 decibels, and a loud rock concert is about 120 decibels. So the reason I'm giving you all of this information is so that you understand three things. First, your body will not shatter like glass if you listen to the wrong music. You're pretty safe, which leads into the second point. The magnitude of what we're talking about is absurd. The volume and the frequency you would have to reach to harm a human with sound is wild, but that doesn't mean that things couldn't vibrate because of sound. 3, we wanted to provide real examples of similar things happening to give you a better picture of what we're dealing with. Here's the bottom line. If a sound, like the song, is big enough and strong enough, theoretically it really could vibrate the ground and vibrate bodies to be heard. A better word might be sensed. So I know you're all dying to hear more about resonance, so let's keep going.
Yay!
Most of an instrument's body is typically made up of what we refer to as a resonance chamber. For example, the wooden body of a string instrument like a violin or a cello. Resonance chambers can come in other shapes and sizes. For instance, the mbira, the Shona thumb piano, is often placed inside of a gourd. This acts as a separated resonance chamber for the instrument, which doesn't make much sound on its own. Resonance chambers work by bouncing the sound around inside. As mentioned before, sound travels best through solids, so we need to give it a little bit of a boost to travel effectively through air. Sound reflects just like light, and it will bounce off of any smooth surface. When it bounces, it doubles back on itself, reinforcing the sound and making it stronger or louder. So this vibrating air that bounces around inside the resonance chamber needs some way to escape and get to your ears to be heard. If it stays inside a sealed rock chamber, like the throat, no one will ever hear it. This is why if you look up, you can actually see a large opening that seems to let in a little bit of moonlight to the caverns below. A real-world analogy to this is the hole in the middle of the guitar, or the S-shapes on top of stringed instruments. If these holes didn't exist, you wouldn't hear as well, if at all, the sounds that you make with your instruments.
And on an added note, if you didn't have ear holes, we wouldn't be able to hear very well either.
The throat has connection points to a lot of parts of the instrument. There are holes to string relay, and arguably to ingestion. So because of those connection points, the sound from those parts of the maze can reach into the throat, bounce around, and then eventually make their way to the surface. On the flip side, sound can be caught in between ridges and rough surfaces. Most of the maze is probably smooth for acoustics, especially parts that contribute to the creation of the song. You can see, crossing from instrument supply to ingestion, or cryptogram library, that there's immediately a difference in the terrain. Rooms like 920 Observation and New Growth have a lot of rough edges and uneven surfaces. This isn't ideal for acoustics, but they're also new. The sound is getting bounced around in those rooms in ways that don't amplify it as well, and it's getting a little bit scattered. But this same concept comes into play much, much more with rooms like Somniloquy and Subliminal Media. Soundproofing is full of rough edges because sound will literally get caught in the crevices and fizzle out. So now we get to talk about something truly terrifying. The anechoic chamber in Orfield Laboratories in Minnesota. The background noise in this room measures in the negative decibels, negative 9.4 decibels. Regular soundproofing isn't this extreme, but they really wanted to make the quietest room they could, and if you look at this room, you will see that they have spared no expense.
Oh, I hate this room. This is a especially cursed room.
It's a very cursed room. Every inch of the walls and even the floor has been layered with sharp, spiky bits of wall. And in between these panels, sound gets caught and tries its best to bounce back and forth, but ultimately can't. The floor has been covered with netting so that they can put even more soundproofing under it.
Is this the room where you can hear your own heartbeat?
Yes, you can. This room is so quiet that it's been theorized to make people go crazy.
Oh, I love it.
Now just add in some damn cave gas and you're set.
So whatever the cult is trying to hear in somniloquy either can't be allowed out into the rest of the instrument, or they don't want the sounds of the song to be let in to allow them to hear more clearly. We do know a little bit about what they're testing.
And what little bit that we do know is mostly about that special cave gas. Speak as One uses the gas as a means for listening for the first voice, or whatever voice that they initially spawned for, essentially the origin of the species of daemons. They do this through dunking sleepers within the gas, where they enter the deepest form of sleep and then they go beyond that. This same form of sleep is what allows them to try and decode the names of the other daemons. Speak as One states that truth can be found in the deepest sleep, which comes with the gas.
The Measured Cuts has said that Speak as One is listening for something, but they're keeping quiet about it, so maybe the soundproofing is for both directions. Who knows? It's a mystery.
So we've talked about volume, now let's talk about pitch. In a stringed instrument, the length of strings changes their pitch. In the maze, this happens in a room called string relay. In this chamber, sets of strings move back and forth along tracks. The bottom track is completely horizontal, it's flat, but the top track is at a diagonal. This means that these sets of strings, when they move, are being not just moved, but stretched and relaxed. If you watch, you can see them thickening when they relax and thinning when they're stretched. You can try this on your own. If you have a rubber band, stretch it between your fingers. The more you stretch it, the higher that sound goes. So these shorter, relaxed strings make longer wavelengths and deeper sound. They're looser and they vibrate less. Tighter strings, longer strings, make shorter wavelengths and a higher sound. They're stretched tighter, they vibrate more in the space of any given time. In the real world, if you are familiar with any kind of instruments, when you tune guitar strings, turning the little keys stretches and relaxes the string. Similarly, the size of metal tubing impacts pitch. We can see this in the plexus. Large organ pipes have a much deeper sound than the smaller ones. If you go over to the far sides of the plexus when you first enter from the nerve center, those gigantic tubes have a deep, deep sound. But if you stay closer to the center where the smaller pipes are, you can hear the difference. Think about blowing across the lip of a bottle. If the bottle has more liquid and thus less air, the sound of the air inside it has a higher pitch. If you empty out some of that liquid, the bottle will create a lower pitch.
All right, so now we're going to move down to architecture, as you were warned about in that ever-distant spoiler warning. The arches create a wind tunnel to and from dream therapy. Basically, the way that it's set up is you can see from dream therapy to subliminal message how the air and with it the sound waves would be pushed. Traditionally, in a lot of houses, if you want a natural air conditioning, they'll have two large rooms with a window in each, connected by a single hallway. This makes it to where if you open up one window and you open up a window on the other side, the cold air from one side will be pushed and drawn all the way through to the other one, cooling the entire house in the process. So it carries the sound in the same way that, say, Georgian architecture carries air from one window to another. It carries the sound down to it. When you enter the arches, you can hear a wind sound activate when you enter it. This happens once per game. It happens every single time. Keep an ear out. You will notice it.
And now, finally, we can explain the weird-ass title of this episode.
Rooms in the maze are based on body parts. It might not be all rooms, but a lot of them are.
Sophie's actually spoke to SAO about this to get clarification. They stated that the language of bodies is symbolic. The maze is structured like a body, not because it's a one-on-one match to everything in the maze, but more because it comforts humans. It comforts them to know that when they're stomping around downstairs, they're actually deep, nestled comfortably into the organs of a strange eldritch being. Because that's how we are, I guess.
We aren't ready for the full truth, which is nothing that Lavanya just said. So the language of bodies communicates to us on a more accessible level, according to SAO.
One of the many themes of the game is communication, which Xaviul is not very good at, but we all have to learn. Another theme of the game is the many ways that information passes, travels, morphs, and translates throughout the process.
So, what is language? Dictionary definitions follow language, they don't predicate it, so we're not using those as a source in this discussion. But it is a very wide and far-reaching discussion among scholars. You'll find people defining it different ways, but for our purposes, we can think about language as patterns that communicate ideas. There are different kinds of these patterns, audible patterns like speech and singing and music. But there's also other things like physical patterns, like sign language, kipu, writing, dance, and old tongue, and structures and architecture. And given this, we need to ask ourselves, if the language of bodies is indeed a language, the structure of the instrument, if that is a language, what is it communicating? There was a huge amount of content that we didn't get to talk about because this episode was already very dense, so we're going to be releasing an episode 8.5. It will be mostly theory, but useful theory. The purpose of the Dreaming Prophet is to arm club members with the facts. Some of this information is really hard to find, and we've spent hours trying to pull it together. Therefore, we'll present what we have. You judge and you decide, but at least you'll have a place to start. Cal, Archer's Volley, and Skigulium has made a lore master doc. If you're new to the game or if you know someone who is, please check it out. They're trying to source as much info as possible with transcripts and videos, compiling the disparate info of the community into something comprehensible. Cass has made a lore primer comic. This is a compilation of some of the latest in the lore field broken down from an in-character perspective, so check it out.
And over on the Dreaming Prophet Twitter, we have a new feature called Breaking News. It is a weekly compilation of the latest news in the Blackout Club in terms of what has happened this past week.
And it looks sick as hell.
Feel free to retweet it. Feel free to look at it if you can't keep up with the rapid-fire nature of SAS, and get yourself updated on some of the basics.
You can follow the account at TheDreamingPC on Twitter. Spoderman has made a transcript master doc. If you have transcripts or video links, please send them to him. Further information is on the doc itself, which is at tinyurl.com/tbctranscripts. All of these links are in our description, so visit them as you please. And finally, if you enjoy the Blackout Club, please leave a review of the game. If you already have, wonderful. If you haven't, time to get on that. We'll be linking the store page in the description. After you've left a review, use hashtag The Dreaming Prophet and hashtag The Blackout Club on Twitter to share your favorite Blackout Club memories. The Blackout Club is made by Question Games. Our advertising director is Bellamy. Our transcript and video is by Lavanya. Audio editing is by me, Astro. Spoderman is our publicity guy. Xaviul smells like blue paint.